Welcome to One Rank Show, and here's your host, Ken Rank.
All right, so I'm here today with Caleb Rushing. Caleb is a senior at Asbury University and is a young man who I coached in coach pitch pre-Little League 14 years ago, Caleb.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable how fast time flies. I got to know your family through that, and they might become my favorite alliteration ever. They are a faith-filled family, really are. Real blessing. I get to see your dad once in a while, and your mom still orders Derby Day T-shirts for her elementary school classes around Derby time. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ken.
So you are a senior at Asbury. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and why did you choose Asbury?
Yeah, so I'm a senior at Asbury. I am majoring in youth ministry, minoring in business. And I'm originally from Winchester, Kentucky. We moved to Mount Sterling when I was in 8th grade. To be closer, I grew up going to Bath County school systems. My senior year, I didn't know what Asbury was until my senior year, around December. And I was dead set on going to Western Kentucky University, and I applied to every other school except Asbury. So funny how the Lord just does that. But I ended up at Asbury. Basically, I thought I wanted to play sports in college, further that part of my life, and then so I went and toured it in probably December of 2020, and then I found it, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to play any sports. I just don't think that's in my field of cards right now, but I was still thinking about Asbury, and then I applied to every school, but only toured to Asbury and Western. And then I was pretty dead set on Western, but anytime anybody asked me, hey, where are you going to school? I'm like, oh, I don't know. But Asbury was the first thought that would always come to mind. And I was like, hey, that's probably something, right?
A little soft, still voice.
Yeah, a little soft, still voice. And so I ended up just saying, all right, God, that's my first initial thought every time I think about college, so that might be something. So I committed to it, and I mean, I've been there for 3 years, and it's changed my life in ways that I can't even imagine.
You know, that soft, still voice bothers me a little because I just literally wrote an article like last week and posted it on my site about how God doesn't speak in that earth-moving wind or in the fire, but he speaks in that soft, still voice. And you get someone like Elijah who did these amazingly bold things, and it wasn't like God was saying, Elijah, go and do. No, he heard that soft, still voice, and that's mistakable sometimes. Like, we really got to be in tune with God.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you were, because good things came out of you going to Asbury. You've already done an overseas mission trip too, right?
Yeah, I went to Albania. Last summer.
Who goes to Albania?
I didn't even know what Albania was until then. That was another soft, still kind of God moment too.
Yeah. What did you do while you were there?
In Albania, we worked with this sports camp, ministry camp, that people over there that are from the U.S. have gone over there, have been missionaries there for about 12 years or so. And they started building this ministry called Yeda in the village of Velashai over there. And we went over there, and we were working these sports camps, and they're for kids in the village and also kids with disabilities. And we just did ministry there, and we also did a little bit of outreach as well.
That's pretty cool. You got to still do some sports.
Yeah.
So, and I know you were good. You played hoops and baseball in high school. We had a homeschool team that my son was on, and we actually got to play against Caleb, and pretty sure we won that game, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
So, look, let's go back to February 2023. It's been a year and a half already since the Asbury Revival, so that's an amazing thing, and I wasn't there at all. My wife and I think on that first Saturday night, we're like, you want to ride down? And I don't remember why we didn't, but we didn't. And that was our last opportunity to go because of how filled it became, that tiny little town, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that amazed me about the entire thing is, and it's just how people get these preconceptions, is I went back and I watched the sermon that the pastor spoke at your chapel, before it happened. And I don't know what I was expecting, like, a fiery thing, and this big revival breaks out from this. That's not how it works. And it absolutely nothing against that pastor, but that it wasn't fiery. It was a good message. It was a solid message. I can see it really resonating with everybody who was there. But it seems like from what I've been told, this really broke out when people that were praying and worshiping just kind of didn't leave. And so why don't you, if I'm wrong, correct me, but pick it up from there and just what happened?
Yeah, so Zach Creeves was the one that preached that day.
Right.
And he'll even tell everybody that asked him, he got off that stage and was like, that was the worst sermon I ever preached. So, I mean, he had came and preached about 2 weeks before that. That was the first time I had ever like heard him speak, and he's a good, eloquent speaker, and
very
just
much
is
so.
very much filled with the Spirit, and so just is a really great dude overall. But he was like, he called his wife immediately after and was like, I'm ready to get home. I preached the worst sermon, like that just was bad. But I remember in his sermon, I remember at the very beginning, I wrote in my journal, I was like, God, revive us of your love. And it's just crazy to see how the Lord just does it, And
Mm-hmm.
so after he spoke, I think just a lot of us were just really receiving the Lord through worship, and we were all just hungry for more of what God was doing. And about 17 of us stayed after. I was one that stayed after, and I was supposed to have class the next period, but
Supposed to.
Yeah, supposed to, but I ended up missing the rest of my classes that day and ended up being there until like 2 a.m. But, I mean, I remember coming to Asbury and the Lord's like, I want to do something new. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that looks like. And just knowing that so many people had been praying for an outpouring of the Spirit and seeing how that day, woke up, almost didn't go to chapel that day. I ended up going and totally Holy Spirit driven, but like we ended up going and, after that it's just spending time with Jesus. It's like, I don't want to stop spending time with Jesus today. Like I just can't really just leave and go to class and be okay with that. So, and that's just the way a lot of people were too. And they're just staying and worshiping and praying, and it's just genuine worship too. Like the worship team was up there, and then after the worship team, just random people from Asbury just started like grabbing their guitars, going and getting their.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they started going back to their dorm, getting their guitars, coming up, and we were all just around. Like it was almost like a big worship campfire. Like we're all just around, just worshiping, singing, and then after that, gradually like more and more people start coming. I remember texting one of my buddies, and I was like, dude, come back in here. Like, the Lord's really moving here. And he was like, all right, I'll be there after my class. And he's,
now.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'd come now. And he ends up coming. He's like, wow. And, like, just a lot of people just were so drawn to what the Lord was doing in that space that, I mean, like, the people just kept growing and growing, and before you knew it, it was like everybody just was in there by like 6 or 7 p.m.
Yeah, that's what I had heard. By around 7 o'clock, it was basically full again.
Yeah.
That's full as what, 2,500?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that realm?
Somewhere in that.
That's absolutely amazing. And then that first night, it went until 2 in the morning?
Yeah. Well, for me, it did. After that, I was like, all right, I need some rest.
Did it go all night?
Yeah.
It didn't stop?
No, there was people in there all night.
That's something I didn't know. And I'm assuming, it thins out, obviously. But when the next day did you realize that something special was? I mean, what had happened is already special. I'm not belittling that. But when you wake up the next day and you find out it's still going on, when did you realize there's something really happening here?
I honestly think, like, right in the moment, whenever I saw a lot of people, I don't know, it was kind of like God was just affirming us right from the beginning. Because earlier that week, we have a ministry on campus called WGM, which stands for World Gospel Mission. And we have a service every Sunday night for students, and we have food, all of that. That Sunday, like, the Lord just was evidently moving in so many people's hearts that were on campus that came, and it was just like, wow. Like,
so this is before the chapel service. And
Yeah.
what day was the chapel service?
That Wednesday.
It was a Wednesday, so a couple of days, few days before.
Yeah, a few days before, and it was just like, for me personally, I I was just like, wow, like the Lord's really doing something on my heart right now, and I don't know what this is. And then like a few days later, seeing how on Wednesday all of that happened, and it was like as soon as you see all these people, because we've had people stay after chapel before and pray, and maybe it's lasted like an hour and a half or so, but I don't know, it was something about this one where people were staying after, and we just were all kind of spread it out. It wasn't that like one major group stayed after, like people were spread out all over the chapel of people that were staying after, and they were just praying and just sitting and being, and then just seeing how that day, how so many people were just praying together, praying boldly over these things that they've been praying on for years, and seeing some of them come to fruition, and then like seeing the act of confession start to take place, and see the just act of repentance, and just all of that. Like I think like from the very get-go of the outpouring, it was like we knew this was going to be special, and it was, God, we don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know. I mean, we'd heard about the other outpouring back in the 70s or so, and I mean, that was always on our minds of like, whoa, I wonder what that would look like.
It could happen.
Yeah, it could happen, but it was like, I don't know if that will happen. But like from the very get-go of, I'd say on that chapel day, like as soon as you started seeing people really start stepping into what the Lord was leading them, you were like, I don't know how long this is going to go, but I know this is special, and this is touching the hearts of everyone that enters this room. And so however long this goes, it's going to be special.
So this is sort of a redundant question, but you know, there's always detractors. I spend some time on Facebook and different places, and I try to share, bits and pieces about the Lord and things I've been gifted to understand. And of course, I try to listen and grow as well. But you see a lot, and I know that there are some detractors that say that what happened there wasn't real. And obviously, we get the feeling right off the bat that it was real.
Yeah.
But if someone was to come up to you and say, "Was it real?" How do you deal with them? What do you say?
I mean, I've been asked that question so many times since it. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, but if someone asks me if it's real, I tell them fully confidently it was real, and I tell them fully confidently that I was a bit skeptical too, like beforehand, and that's how I like to relate to people, because like truly, something that big and that big of an act of God is just like, wow, like hard to believe at times. But to me, the biggest thing I think a lot of people think sometimes is like, oh, that was planned by people,
right.
That was orchestrated by people.
Which sadly happens. I mean, there's
Yeah.
been other times, and then people tend to chase the signs.
Yeah.
And then you find out, well, this really wasn't what we thought it was. And so I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah, and reality is we live in a broken world and full of broken people, but I mean the greatest thing though is like we were marked by the blood of Jesus that he died and rose again for us and saved us, and so just in that moment, like, me being like, wow, I don't know about this, but seeing how the Lord was just so evidently moving in the hearts of people. And there are some people there that, they didn't have the best experience with it. And,
really?
Yeah, and so I guess for me, it really taught me just like how to boldly pray and how to further my prayer life. And it really taught me that like Jesus isn't simply just in a massive outpouring in Hughes Auditorium, but Jesus is everywhere, quite literally, if we acknowledge that He's there. And so I think when people ask me, like, was it real or was it not, it's just more of, like, I know it's real because in Scripture, like, the Lord just says ways that He will reveal Himself to us, and, like, you see so evidently that that's what He's done here in this moment. And there's been times where people just misinterpret stuff or do it for show or further it for show. But I mean, it was just one of those things where you just kind of had to sit back, trust that the Lord was moving, and see what was to come of it, and keep it in good hands. But yeah, I think I think just overall, like, just the change and the radical humility you saw of people, and just the confession, the love, and the forgiveness of one another, just seeing all those things take place, it's like you couldn't, to me, it was hard to look at it and be like,
And not see God.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how it affected you, but I think you've done a pretty good job. Is there any other ways it's affected you, even over time?
Yeah, well, so that going into college, I think well, no, there's no thing. I know that the Lord had me at Asbury to simply like further my relationship with Him and like find good Christian community that can build me up and build me up stronger for the Lord and do all of that. But like little did I know the lessons that the Lord was going to teach me at Asbury. And my first year of college was like really, really good. All of my college years have been really good. But stepping into sophomore year, I was stepping into a lot of roles of leadership that I didn't really know how to do because I had never really been in that scenario. And it was also a matter of just busyness. And so I would say like I was putting a lot of pressure on myself before to just really get it right, get everything right. And also like that semester I was struggling a lot with just overthinking and like anxiousness and just really anxious about like what the Lord was going to have me do for Him and what the Lord was going to push me to do after college or even just simply in general, because I'm somebody that always has been a people pleaser, little less now, more of just like I want to please God. But in that moment, I'm just like so overthinking about like, God, what can I do? How am I supposed to please you? How can I do this? How can I do this? And honestly, like during the outpouring, the Lord was just like, dude, I just want you and your love. And I just want to love you and leave the rest to me. I'm like, oh, snap. Okay. So I would say something that from the outpouring that it changed me was it made me more have a better understanding and more awareness of spiritual warfare in the world and more awareness of like
A lot of that.
Yeah, and made me more aware of just a spiritual battle that is going on even in my own heart and how to best combat that with running to the Lord instead of running to our earthly desires that fill us only momentarily. I had a time like that here recently actually with the camp that I'm serving at this summer in Ohio. It's Beulah Beach, and there I had 2 weeks. We had just gotten off high school week, and it was family camp week, which for my role, family camp is really chill. I get to just rest and not really be as go. But like that week, the Lord was like, dude, I want to do something very special next week. Whenever the middle schoolers come back, I'm like, okay, I don't know what that looks like, but let's do it. And then the Lord ended up providing some really cool things for us. And the rest of that week after that, like I just was feeling such a heaviness, such a spiritual warfare. And the Lord just was like, dude, just keep your eyes on me, keep your eyes on me. And then seeing how He ended up doing so much that next week and His promises, He is a promise keeper, like seeing how like running to Him, He's always going to take care of it. I mean, that's just an example, but that's something that He showed me during the outpouring that I didn't really know I would need or would need furthering my faith journey. And then I'd say something else is He strengthened my prayer life a lot. And prayer life is just...
see that for sure.
Yeah, and prayer life is just so important in our walk with the Lord. And not simply like, He changed my prayers too, instead of being like, God, I want this. God, can you give me this? God, can you give me this? And it changed my prayers more so to like, God, you are good. You are wonderful. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. Lord, just strengthen me to the best that you want me to be strengthened to. And just more prayers directed at Him and directed at our walk with Him rather than kind of a piggy bank prayer, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. I think all too many people treat Him like a genie sometimes.
Yeah.
You can rub the bottle and get what you want, and that's
Yeah.
it's actually paganism. But
Yeah, and we're all guilty of that at
Oh,
times.
no,
but-
absolutely.
But yeah, so
it's
those
human nature to want.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just is what it is.
Yeah, so those two I would say are probably the biggest things that he changed me of, and also just total surrender to. Before it was during that time, someone taught me, it was my mentor, he taught me to pray with, like, he told me to close my fist, and he said, that represents the things you're holding on to. Turn your hands over and open them. That means you're open-handed with what the Lord wants to do in your life, and you're receiving him. And I was like, dang. And something as small as that, I mean, has changed my life so much, because, like, in that moment, and even after the outpouring, like, during the rest of that semester, like, the Lord was just nudging at pieces of my heart and showing me, like, areas that I was holding on to so deeply that he was trying to take away, and it was just killing me.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, golly, yeah. So.
Well, that's the thing. The learning never ends.
Yeah.
It never will end until we're perfected, which is, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
You, and I'm not asking you to share it, but your dad told me that you got to get up and share your testimony.
Yeah.
So what was it like speaking in front of 2,500 people?
Oh, it was probably well over that, more than that.
At that
many.
point, yeah,
because the night we shared it was like the third or fourth night, I can't remember, but I was just in my dorm room. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to my dorm room real quick and just chill. One of my friends, his name's Seth, he came in my room, opened my door, and was like, bro, Dr. Hull's looking for you. He's a professor. He's actually my roommate's dad, my advisor, just really awesome dude. But he was like, dude, Dr. Hull's looking for you. I'm like, for what? He's like, wants us to share. I'm like, where? He's like, on stage. I'm like,
no.
Right there? He was like, yeah. I'm like, wow. Okay. So that was probably like my first time speaking at a enormous crowd like that. And I was just like, what in the world am I doing? Like, there's no way. And I ended up going, and me and Seth were like, wow. And so we just prayed right before that the Lord's will would be done, that he would just speak solely through us, and we would just exalt him in that moment. And I mean, we're up there, and I don't know, honestly, like, I got up there and I'm just getting to look at the whole crowd, and seeing people in the aisles, seeing people in the back standing, seeing people all up in the balcony area. Like, there's not a seat open in the house. There's not a space
What
open.
night is this? How
This is
long?
like night 3, night 4.
So were people milling around outside at that point?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
This was the last night before they actually were like, all right, we got to actually put lines and do all that, so that, because fire hazards.
Oh, that, and you get a lot of people coming that just aren't part of,
Yeah.
you gotta be careful.
Yeah, and so, which I was looking out, and I'm like recognizing people. Like, I saw a family from Mount Sterling there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like, wow, like, y'all drove all the way from.
Well, they came, I don't think that they come from there. They came from all over the
Oh,
country.
yeah.
I mean, there were people that flew in from other countries too,
Yeah.
but
But it's just like, it's cool to see how, people you even know, you've just recognized and seen, like, in passing. You just see them there, you're like, wow. But we're just sitting up there and we're speaking. And, I don't know, it was just like, I'm just looking up there and I'm seeing all my brothers and sisters in Christ, and we're all just worshiping the same God. And I'm like, wow, like, this is beautiful. And Lord, how can we continue to further your kingdom here? And I don't know, it was an interesting experience, because I'd never done anything like that before. And I don't know, it was so cool too to just think about how, like, the Lord gives us all a unique story and gives us a testimony to share, and no one's testimony is the same. Because me and Seth both shared, and we both stayed after the same time, but our stories were similar but also very different, and it just was cool to hear how, like, the uniqueness of the Lord's doing that, and just seeing all those people. It's like, not one of these people are the exact same as the other, and how beautiful is that?
Sharing your testimony, you're sharing how a living God has affected your life.
Yeah.
To a people who are looking for a living God. I think testimonies are one of the better evangelistic tools.
Yeah.
Because you're sharing your heart, you're sharing your experiences, you're making God real, and that's what it means to walk in his name. It means to share his character, share his authority, share what he's doing in your life, share the greatness of him. and everything. We kind of hit on it just a little bit. There's 6,000 residents in Wilmore, and there were reports that there were up to like 35,000 people in this tiny little town at one point.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because you had been in Asbury for almost, what, 3 years at this point?
Two.
Two, so you were a sophomore.
Yeah, I was almost halfway through school.
But it's still it's still kind of your home for 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
You've got it all down. And
I was
all of a
settled
sudden-
in, yeah.
Yeah, all of a sudden you've got 3 or 4 times the amount of people milling about, and they ultimately had to back things off and eventually shut the public out because of how bizarre. What was it like living there when that was going on?
It was a mixture of emotions, honestly. Like, the very beginning, and I got to see evidently how, both in my life and other people's hearts, like my heart and other people's hearts, how just broken we are as humans in general. Because, I mean, like, there were times, at the beginning, because we experienced it from the very beginning, and we're like, wow,
you
this
literally
is awesome.
you were literally there from the very inception.
Yeah, and we're like, wow, this is awesome, and then probably about like a week and a half, you just see all these people at your little town, and you're like, man, I kind of wish this would just, like, these people would just go, because I mean, when you got all these random people, obviously you need security, and I mean, we're having security like escort us to classes.
Really?
Like, it was crazy. I'm going out of my dorm, and that's when which obviously we keep the dorms locked. We have good safety. But, like, there was just random moments where you just see very random people, and you're like, what's up? But also, like, oh my. Like, and I'm going to class, and where Hughes is, like, there's classrooms underneath Hughes, and there's Hughes Auditorium, there's like 3 buildings connected to it, which is where a bunch of our classrooms are. And so I am opening a door to go, and there's this security guard who has like this big buff stuff, and he's like, can I see your ID? I'm like, yeah, here's my school ID, go to class. And it's just crazy how in such a small school like that, I'm like having to show my ID to get to class, and which was just crazy. But all those people, it was like really good. Then there for a while, like, truthfully, a bunch of us were kind of just frustrated, because it's like, man, we just kind of want to go back to our lives and just go back to, like,
you don't want the pouring of the Spirit to end. But
but you're just like, man, like, I need to be able,
you need to breathe.
Yeah, I need to breathe.
It's your place.
But then I found myself kind of in Hughes one day, and they were just singing. This was like the first time I was in Hughes for a couple of days, and it was like a couple of days after the frustration, and they were all just, there was no music, there was no like guitars, no instruments being played, no sound system. It was just like no one really on stage leading it. It was just the entirety of Hughes just singing the Angus Day, and they were just like, holy, holy are you, Lord God Almighty, and sang that for probably 40 minutes straight. And at that moment, I was like,
powerful.
Yeah, at that moment, I was like, okay, yeah, all these people, this is cool. And then I saw, we had a map where it, like, all strings pointed to Wilmore, Kentucky, but then all, like, the strings it started in Wilmore, and then they went out to where everybody was from. And I mean, those strings pointed all over the world. It was crazy. There was people flying in from Australia, from Asia, Africa, Europe, from herds of people. Like, there was a dude, he was like, you go to school here? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, where are you from? He's like, oh, I just got in this morning. I'm flying out tomorrow morning. I'm like, from where? He's like, oh, I just flew in from California. I'm like,
you just came in for the day.
Just came in just to see
it.
Yeah, and I had people like DMing me on Instagram that I never had met ever, and they were like, hey, we feel really glad to come. We saw you go to Asbury. Like, is there a way we could stay in your dorm? All this. I'm like,
sure.
I'm like, this is cool, but
no.
Yeah, also, yeah, like, it was just crazy. And so all those people, it was like good, but also hard, but also really good, but also hard. So it was a good little mixture of
Did you see them being affected in ways that your fellow students were? Like, lives were changed inside. People were opening up their hearts in ways they never had before, submitting to God in ways maybe they hadn't been before. Did you see a lot of that outside, or were they? I don't want to make this sound wrong, but were they more onlookers? It sounds, like what was the spirit like outside? Because I know that at one point, like it got to the point where you could only put so many people in there, and then there's 10,000 people outside. What was that like? Did you get outside and check it out?
Yeah. So we have this green where we have this thing called the semicircle, which is pretty much like the front of Asbury, and then there's this big green. I mean, you would have thought it was like this massive concert festival or something with the amount of people out there. I mean, like you could not see a speck of green. There were so many people. But they ended up bringing out screens out there and like had worship out there. And there's a picture of just so many people just on their knees in worship outside on the green. And someone said it best one time. They were like, people kind of viewed it as like the woman who, if she believed if she could just touch the garment of Jesus's
Right.
cloak, that she would be healed. And in a way, people were kind of like doing that with huge steps. Like if they could just get to the steps and just see what the Lord was doing, like, I don't know. It was just seeing how the Lord was moving there. And even outside, like people were just worshiping and just like praising the Lord all together. And it was almost just like people were gravitated to what the Lord was doing there, and they just wanted to come and be a part of it, whether inside or outside.
Right.
And I mean, people are getting, like me and some other people are outside, and we're getting to talk to people and hear their testimonies about how they ended up there, and it just was so neat. And so,
Could imagine.
yeah.
I would like to have gone, but like I said, by the time we did decide to go, there were so many people there, and
Yeah.
the idea of parking and walking 3 miles at that point, it was
Yeah.
February after all.
Yeah.
Other revivals broke out from this. I mean, it was sort of like a springboard, and Samford University, Lee, Cedarville, NKU, Baylor, and others had revival as well. I don't know how long they lasted. I didn't really follow it as much, but do you know anybody that went to those other schools? Were you in contact with anybody, or any idea what they ended up like, impact they had?
I wasn't really in contact with like other people of how the impacts, but like I do remember hearing just breakout all over, and it was like whenever I heard about the breakout, it was like I got this peace from the Lord that He was moving in this generation and wants to renew the minds and renew the hearts of this generation and all the generations to come, and even the generations that are before me as well. Just He wants
The old
to
people
renew.
like me? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. But like He just wants to renew the lives and the hearts of all.
Yeah.
Like I had family come down who raised me up, and seeing how the Lord's renewed their minds and like renewing, just not just from that, but just as renewing their minds, renewing their lives, and renewing their families. And like, I don't know, it just was evident to me that there's a battle in the spiritual realm in this world, but the Lord has already
The end of the book's
victory.
been written.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
know
book's been written. There's victory already, and the sooner that all of us come to terms that there is victory in Jesus, like,
it's a very freeing time.
Yeah.
It really is.
yeah. And so, like, in that moment, I just was hearing about all these other ones. I'm just like, wow, like, yeah, Jesus, like, you're casting your victory on all these hearts and touching their hearts in a very unique way.
Yeah. Last week we had 21 people from our congregation go to a camp in North Carolina, and they came back pumped, I guess would be the best way to say it. It's a camp that starts on a Sunday night and it ends on a Friday, but Thursday night is like the big final time. And generally what happens with these kids, from what I've been told, is that it just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds, and you have a Asbury-like kind of experience on that Thursday night where there's genuine submission, and kids that are normally very shy opening up and raising hands and sharing their innermost thoughts and pains with adults and being prayed for. It's like a real amazing thing. Well, this year apparently that took place on the first night. and kept taking place all week long. And so I actually was teaching this week, and when they came back, I thought, okay, we'll let them share what they're going to share about what happened in camp this week. 15 minutes. That'll give me about an hour to do my talk. I basically got 15 minutes to do the talk, and they took an hour and could have taken 3 hours. But afterward, there was a real prayer session. And I guess I'm sharing that to just say that, all too often we see we're driving down the road and we see, revival, July 17th to the 24th. We don't plan these things. God creates these things. It's the pouring out of His Spirit, and I think that we really yearn for that. I think we all do. So it's amazing. Have you seen continuing fruit come out of what happened at Asbury? In other words, we're a year and a half out of when it started. Do you see continuing fruit? I don't know how else to ask the question. Changes in people's lives that have sustained?
I would say, yeah. I would say, your life, like the Lord gives us choices, and the Lord, I don't know, I like to think of it as like, you can find the most fruit ever in Jesus, but ultimately, like, you need to wake up every day and choose Jesus every day if you want to see that. And I think since that, like, I've seen a lot of people that I'm close with and people I'm not even close with, just seeing how their lives have been impacted. And I would say so much fruit has been bared from it, because I've seen a bunch of ministries changed. I've seen a bunch of I've heard of like a lot of different churches like changing their ways, like from the outpouring, like they've seen how they've been doing things and they're like, we need to change this. Like, it needs to be more Holy Spirit driven and more just relying on the Lord rather than our own actions, and seeing the fruit that's come from that in churches, and seeing how like people are changing their majors, and not like changing their majors to, some are changing their majors to like full-time ministry at Asbury, but like some are even, going from maybe ministry to business because they've sensed that, the Lord's calling them more that direction since that. And so like seeing how, so many people are just taking one step further in their walk with Jesus from it. Like, that's just such a victory in my eyes. And I think definitely in a lot of people, because for me, I serve at that WGM ministry, and I serve at other aspects of Asbury too. And it just seems like there's a lot more like banding together, if that makes sense, at Asbury
Absolutely.
now, and which is good, because before the outpouring, like, Asbury was still awesome, but it just felt like, for me personally, it felt like, there was definitely these cliques and definitely like just these different groups of people. But
Pretty much like our country today.
Yeah, but like afterwards, it felt like it was just banded together. And some other people might tell you otherwise, but for me personally, that's how I felt. And before the outpouring, I felt like the Lord, I was just like, golly, like, this campus just needs something, Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen people's lives change left and right from it. It's just like their before and after. It's been so beautiful, and getting to walk with some of those people still, and then just seeing some of them from a distance, it's like, wow, like the Lord really did break chains and is continuing to break chains through that. And now people are stepping into things that they never really knew that they were capable of, but the Lord knew and has shown them that they're capable of it.
Yeah, and they've also, it seems, based on what you've said, that they've developed some armor, in the sense that, like, as you really begin to walk in your ministry, whatever that ends up being and looking like, the more you're called to do from God, the more you're going to be attacked. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. I've been, been a pastor for a while, and the more the deeper you get into the walk, and the more lives that you begin to impact, the more of a threat you become to the adversary and the heart, and you're going to be attacked. And one of the things that sounds like that you really learned from this is is to the depth of your prayer life, being able to submit to Him and just lay it before Him and let Him direct you. And
Yeah.
that's a huge thing.
Yeah, before that, my prayer life was just pretty shaky, pretty not the best, which there's not a rule book of how your prayer life should be, but I
No.
just knew in my heart and knew in my life that my prayer life was not the best. Either I just was being like a genie bottle with it, like, God, like, you see these things, like, why am I, like, just the genie bottle kind of prayers, or I just wasn't doing them and didn't know how to pray. But a little bit before the outpouring, really heavily after the outpouring, I started journaling and prayer journaling. And now it's just like, if I go a day or two without prayer journaling, like, it's like, oh, I can't do that, And
As a sort of a last question, what does your prayer journal look like? What are you sharing with yourself or with God? And without getting into personal details, I'm just curious what you're writing down.
Yeah, I just kind of go at it now as being raw and honest with the Lord, because the Lord wants our honesty. And
So you're kind of writing to Him as you
yeah,
write. Okay.
I'm writing to Him and talking to Him as if He's right next to me. And for me, some people like verbally out loud pray to the Lord as if He's right there, and I could do that, but for me, it just is like hard for me to do that. But like, because I'm just so like, I think about everything, and I just like,
Like you said earlier, you got to get out of your head.
Yeah, I got to get it out of my head. So for me, being able to focus is where, whenever I'm journaling, is best when I can best focus. So I'm just kind of journaling as if I'm writing a letter to the Lord, but also just like telling Him about my day, telling Him about the things I'm grateful for. Gratitude is huge. Everything and huge. And so that's something too the Lord taught me during the outpouring, is how huge gratitude is. And so giving Him gratitude and giving Him thanks for all that He's done, because there's always a reason to be thankful for the Lord, and just learning to do that and putting those ahead of my desires, but also being honest with the Lord of like, hey, God, you've given me these desires. I don't know what that looks like, but I trust you and I give them back to you open-handed, because everything that the Lord gives us is not meant for us to hold on so tightly to. It's meant for us to give it back to Him open-handedly and allow Him to take and make it better and make it more new. And so I think through my prayer journaling, I've learned to accept the things the Lord's given me, but also not hold on to them so tightly that if He were to take them away, that it would just absolutely destroy me. And I'm still learning things like that. Like, I'm still learning how to be open-handed with the Lord of just the things that He's given me, and that's something I'm going to be learning forever.
I do like the idea of the open hand, which is interesting because you pray that way too. But gratitude toward the Lord and hospitality toward others, the two, I think, two of the biggest things that we really need to humble ourselves and be able to do. Caleb, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and visit with me today and sharing your story. I'd like to follow up sometime, maybe.
Yeah.
Once you get out of school and start working, if you end up back in town, we can come here and do this again, or we can do it by phone.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate coming out, and everybody, thank you for your time today, for listening. Wish you blessings and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.